March community meeting of the Queen Village Neighbors Association. Tonight we are talking about Act 81, the changes to the state's liquor laws. You're probably here tonight because you care about your neighborhood. Like many communities across the city, Queen Village has had its fair share of hurdles, from pandemic business closures to unlawful dirt bikes and ATVs and water main breaks. It's important to be educated about what is happening in our neighborhoods and why, as well as how to be a part of productive solutions. Act 81, if I may, seems to be born out of the need to throw liquor licensed restaurants and establishments a lifeline to recoup pandemic losses, and that's very understandable. On November 5th, 2021, Act 81 was signed into law. It provides temporary but significant changes to the state's liquor laws. For the next 2 years, through December 31st, 2024, this law allows for liquor licensees to extend their outdoor premises up to 2 blocks from the front door. A liquor licensee can also apply for an unlimited number of catering permits to serve alcohol at off-site events. So how will this affect South Street and the surrounding commercial corridor? Tonight, we have state and local representatives present to help better understand how this is rolling out. Our guests, as they are coming in, we have Michael Vigoda, Director of Legislative and Government Affairs for the State Liquor Control Board. We also have Tisha Albert, Director of Regulatory Affairs for the State Liquor Control Board. Supervisor Michael Dever, Squad Supervisor, State Police Bureau of Liquor Control Enforcement. Lieutenant Michael Long, Commander of the South Street Mini Station. Renee Reinhardt, License and Inspections Code Enforcement Supervisor. Mike Harris, Executive Director of the South Street Head House Business District. State Representative Mary Isaacson, and George Donnelly, Chief of Staff for State Senator Saval. For background, Queen Village is located in the 1st Senatorial District, which has the highest concentration of liquor licenses in the state. Queen Village has been an active participant in the licensing process for alcohol in the neighborhood and a proactive and collaborative partner with governing agencies in the management of nuisance concerns. The need now is to understand how Act 81 affects these processes and how it's managed. I'm going to begin with Michael Vigoda and Tisha Albert. Can you please explain why how the extension of premises worked pre-Act 81 and how it will be working now for the next 2 years?
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. As Eleanor said, my name is Tisha Albert. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs at the Liquor Control Board. So prior to Act 81, and actually let's go pre-pandemic, if a licensee wished to extend their license premise, whether it's inside the footprint or outside, we'll just say add a deck, add a sidewalk cafe to extend outside of their premise, they would file an application for extension of license with a $220 filing fee. And they would also post an orange placard, which is a notice to the community that there's some type of extension. You might also see those in a transfer of ownership as well, but we'll focus on the extension of premise. That placard, again, is a notice to the community that there is some type of extension of premise, and that allows for qualifying entities to file opposition. When the Bureau of Licensing receives those applications, again, pre-pandemic, there was no immediate operating authority. The orange placard would have stayed posted at least 30 days at minimum, which is the time frame where opposition can be filed. We would do an inspection of the premise, and the qualifications at the time would have been, it had to be contiguous to the licensed premise, so immediately outside of the establishment. When the pandemic, when the governor had issued the emergency declaration, there was also legislation passed that we could do emergency extensions. Those emergency extensions allowed a licensee to file for outside areas, again, immediately contiguous to their licensed premise, but the filing of that application, which was free, allowed licensees to immediately operate. So they still had to, licensees still had to post the orange placard, so opposition could still be filed. We would follow up with an inspection just to ensure what the areas are. And when licensees did file that, they would file, upload plans to show us where they were going to extend their premise. Once that occurred, we did the inspection. If everything fell in line, we would approve that type of application. When the declaration ended in June of last year, those emergency extensions ceased to exist. Then we move ahead to the passing of Act 81, and it's similar to the emergency temporary extensions in that a licensee can file for an extension of premise, but it doesn't necessarily have to be immediately outside the premise. It can be up to 1,000 feet out, 1,000 feet from the premise. It's still a free application. Licensees, certain licensees must still post. There's a variety of types of licenses, and I can explain that when Eleanor, I can explain that then. But there are certain licensees that manufacturers that do not have to post the placard, but the majority of restaurant licensees, clubs, hotels, they have to post the orange placard. When we receive that, what we require also is this act allowed an extension even over public thoroughfares, which was prohibited previously. So if the extension is on property that is not owned by the licensee, the licensee must have a right to occupy. So if it's on city sidewalks, if it's at a neighboring park, there has to be some type of right to occupy for us to approve. What we will do now, these extensions are valid until December 31st of 2024. So once this is filed, there's not an additional filing every year. They don't have to do it at the time of renewal or validation. So if they want to continue to use these extended areas, but once they're licensed, they are licensed. So we have to be careful. If someone's licensing their parking lot for temporarily, they can't not have vehicles on the premise. They will continue to be licensed. They're deemed licensed. Now there are situations where licensees will only choose to license them on certain dates. We'll just, for an example, every Saturday, so they'll add the dates. Can you hear me? Okay. So they will just add those dates, and they're very specific to the dates that they list. But otherwise, these extensions can be used until 2024.
So some of the things that I'm just thinking about as people walk down the street and they see cafes that don't seem to be connected possibly to a restaurant because they're not, as you say, contiguous. They're not they're not like sidewalk cafes of the business right behind it. They could be across South Street and another block down. So it's not something to be alarmed about. It is perfectly legal as long as it's able to license, which you'll determine by your investigation after their submission. It will continue on, but only until 2024, December 31st.
Correct. And it is, again, up to 1,000 feet. So it shouldn't be 5 blocks away. Well, whatever, 1,000 feet, you know, depending on your areas, it shouldn't be, but that's, yes.
We run about 500 feet per city block, so it can
Okay.
be about two
Two
blocks
blocks.
away, which is
Okay.
a healthy distance, especially if you're a server. You
Sure.
know, you'll get your
Sure.
steps in. So, but inspections, though there will be an immediate approval if they're in good standing, an inspection will happen regardless, kind of a follow-up. Is that a fair assessment?
The majority of these, yes, they will be inspected. Now, what we have been doing is comparing when a licensee filed, if they had filed during the emergency extension, if they're the exact same areas, those, if we investigate, they will be probably on the tail end because they were already approved. We already did those inspections. So to try not, you know, we're limited on resources as well. So what we want are the licensees that have not filed before, or they are extending beyond the immediate, you know, the contiguous areas right outside of their establishment. So the ones, you know, again, over the public thoroughfares and those that are over the 1,000 feet.
And then it will revert back to contiguous standing requirements post December 31st, 24.
As it stands now, yes.
As it stands now.
Yeah, shy of legislative action to extend it, the sunset date is in there.
Excellent, excellent. And I think we have covered, I did want to ask what are the possible grounds for termination of this licensing?
So what I would say right to occupy if the licensee does not have the right to utilize areas that they have submitted. If there is opposition that is filed, if it is a valid protest, so that would be a licensee within another licensee within 200 feet, a restrictive institution within 300 feet. Those two are considered protest. If there is a valid protest that is filed, the licensee receives notice and their authority should cease. We will follow up with them that their authority ceased until we schedule an administrative hearing to determine the validity, the reasons for the protest. If a petition to intervene outside of 500 feet, if community files, they're considered petitioners. So we would still go to a hearing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a licensee should immediately stop operating. So any opposition filed from a community member, we would have to evaluate that first to determine if authority should cease during the administrative process, the hearing process, I should say. And if I can just add, once the administrative hearing happens, it's before a hearing examiner, then that is presented to our 3 board members for a decision at a public hearing or a public session.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Tisha, for the clarification. And moving on from that is the catering permits, the alcohol catering permits. Their official title is just catering, but it is with the understanding that if it's a permit requested by an alcohol licensed body, then they want to serve alcohol. Am I correct?
So the off-premise catering permits, and if I could again go back pre-Act 81,
Please.
the off-premise catering permits, those are permits that a licensee would apply for. You get one permit. It's like an umbrella. And at the time, pre-Act 81 was a $500 permit fee. So a licensee would pay for the $500. In statute, it was to be filed their calendar year, but they were to be filed by March 1st of every year. That was laxed a little bit over the years, but once a licensee would then, they were allowed initially 50 permits a year, and then it was raised to 52 at some point. They're permitted to serve alcohol off their licensed premise at a deemed location that there was a bunch of provisions. It couldn't be subject to a non-renewal. It couldn't be at a location like a stadium, like a parking lot with the stadium. There has to be a host. It can't be, I want to say self-serving, but it can't be self-serving. It can't just be, I want to do a pop-up here. So there had to be a host. It had to be an event, and we would find out where the event was going to be held, the hours. It couldn't be after midnight. Initially, it was 5 hours, couldn't be more than 5 hours a day. There was, and we would ask like how many people intended to be at this event. So there were a lot of parameters around the criteria. With Act 81, and I just was thinking like, a wedding, someone wanted to cater a wedding and then take or a block party for the city, we'll just say. Now with Act 81, it's a free event, a free permit. I should back up. The licensee was also required to give notice to liquor control enforcement and or the local police. And we do work closely with liquor enforcement, so they have access to our records as well as a notification sheet that we offer the licensee, so they have that. With Act 81, it's a free permit, and now it's unlimited, so they can go beyond the 52 days. There's not a requirement to file it, by May 1st or March 1st. Yeah, and there's no notification. They still would have to notify liquor enforcement, but it's looser than what it was before. There's not as much a criteria. They still cannot, if they were deemed, if there's a current objection against the renewal of license based on citations or police activity, that they're not permitted to hold one. So we would not issue it for that purpose.
So I do have some questions, both about the extension of premises as well as the catering license, so we can make sure that the information is understood and processed. There is some concern about what Act 81, how it could affect the neighborhood, and Jonathan Wall, we will talk about that more. And Gloria Steinberg Briskin is curious to hear about what Lieutenant Long thinks, and we will definitely get to him further down in the conversation, but I want to make sure we have the groundwork on the law and what it says. So if we can, for a moment, go back to the extension of premises, because there was a question from Nalish Seth saying, how is a right established if the business does not own the property? lease rent agreement with a private property owner, agreement with a neighborhood park association. So that is, how is it determined what land is being used? What agreement is that drawn up? Is that spelled out here, or is that under the supervision of another agency?
So it's for the liquor board's satisfaction for right to occupy. If we look at what areas and what location the temporary extension is, whoever that landowner is, the licensee needs to have some type of agreement, whether it's a lease, a consent agreement. We just need to have some kind of valid documentation, not just an email or a so whoever provides that, it's just whoever the landowner is, there needs to be an agreement with the licensee. Does that answer your question?
I believe so. So that is something that when this has been applied for, that have to have been worked out between the licensee and the area where they want to extend the premises of the business.
Yes,
Okay.
and we would still need to, if that agreement is only good for 6 months, then that is when the licensee, and there could be, you know, and I think Mike, Deborah can probably speak to that, but there could be enforcement action then if someone doesn't legally have the right to occupy and they're utilizing it, because then it could be deemed, you know, sales off premise, off the licensed premise, but Mike can
Exactly.
jump in.
And when we opened this, the conversation was about how to understand Act 81 and where there was opportunity for neighborhood or civic input. So you did mention the placard and the requirement to put an orange placard, and it has to be there for 30 days. Unfortunately, it's been our experience here in this immediate neighborhood and district that requirement for placards is not always followed. So what is, if this works the way it's supposed to and everyone does what they're supposed to, there wouldn't be a problem. But what if someone doesn't put up a placard, the neighborhood doesn't know about it, then it's all of a sudden extended? Like, how do we manage that scenario?
Well, I would say that I have licensing analysts that do the inspection. So the minimum that placard stays up is 30 days, but it must stay up until we say yay or nay. So it should minimum 30 days. So our licensing analysts, when they go out, they take a picture of it to upload on our system. If there's not a placard there, if it's not correctly filled out correctly, we have them repost when our analyst is there, and then the 30-day clock starts again. Now, that does not say that someone will take it down, or but if that's the case, one, I think we can pull enforcement in. However, we would try to do this upfront in the licensing process. So I would just offer that if you find that scenario, I can certainly bring it to our attention, and I can give you some contact information, you know, at the end of this, that you can certainly reach out.
Yeah, Eleanor,
Excellent.
we've had in my time with the liquor board, you know, incidences where, hey, I was out for a walk, saw the placard one day, a week later it's gone, and it's still a pending application. And I've received notification from, you know, the senator's office, the representative's office, and we've gone back out and, hey, it's not there. You guys got to start over. You know, it's one of those things that communication, you know, to us is really the key point. Because while Tish's people go and visit, if we're not told it's gone, we may not see it.
And the requirement, yeah, good point, Mick. And the requirement is that it's posted for the passing public, and it's continuously posted. I don't know the wording isn't coming to me right now, but it's continuous posting. Which, if it's not, that we can require that they repost and start over again.
And the other opportunity for neighbor involvement is the valid opposite, verified or valid opposition. Am I saying that correctly? Valid protest. That's in the form of another licensee or business that doesn't wish to have them there, or I jotted it down. I can't remember writing
Restrictive institutions.
restricted institutions.
Yeah. So
Which
that
would be
church, school, playground, daycare. Again, that it has to be within 300 feet of the property line. But yes, those are just a few examples. Yeah. And we've had nonprofit. Again, we would have to look at each scenario whenever it comes in, but we've had nonprofits also that could be considered restrictive institutions.
okay.
Historical societies, as an example.
Mm-hmm. And then, so besides restrictive institutions or another licensee, a petition to intervene, a PTI, can be registered, whether it's an individual or a civic association?
Yeah, so individuals, yes, and we have had through legislative offices, we've had petitions to intervene filed. Now, when it comes to the administrative hearing process, sometimes, those are the individuals that would show up to testify as well. So if you're doing it on behalf of a community, we'll just say Queen Village, you would have someone testify from Queen Village to testify at the hearing. But yeah, and pardon?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just so for those petitions to intervene, that's what we would have to evaluate to determine, and we would try to upfront to determine if it would be deemed valid prior to going to a hearing for the purpose of having the authority cease to use those areas outside until we have an official decision from the board.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. And once, not to make anyone's life or job more arduous, but historically, when the Civic Association was greatly involved in the process of an extension of premises, it was easy to notify the community. But with this happening online and quite immediately, the curiosity is where is the list of who? Is there a master list? Is there a database? Is it shared with agencies? Is there access to it? How does that work if this really picks up in pace?
Excellent question. And because this, we had to implement this as quickly as possible, I would say that the notice placard is probably the best notification for the community. And I know that's not much help with, once they're deemed approved and they can remove that placard. Again, this is good for, another 2 years. We are attempting, the unfortunate thing is, they're still considered temporary extensions. So we don't have system requirements, and that's what we're working through now, not just with the extension of premise, but the off-premise catering permit. So we are working with our software company to try to have some type of easier way to determine which licensees are filing these type of applications. Not quite there yet, but
And you did, we'll handle that. I wanted to ask what of those then, or if anything, applies to a catering permit. Now, to revisit that, a licensee, an alcohol licensee, liquor licensee can apply for an umbrella permit to be able to do off-premise catering with alcohol. And then once they get approved for that, they can apply for the individual day permits, correct?
They can, and again, it's unlimited. There's no 5-hour limitation anymore. So if a licensee wanted to have an all-day event, that's permitted. Now they still have to have a host. They still have to do the notification. And I mentioned previously, liquor control enforcement, they do have access to our systems. So they certainly have the ability to determine if they go out for a compliance check or whatever the inspection is, that to determine if they have a valid permit.
And they're probably this is going to come up further as we get to our other guests, of course, Lieutenant Long and Renee Reinhardt from License and Inspections. But it is the, we've had our fair share of, for lack of a better word, speakeasies. So it's hard to determine if you see a location as a neighbor and maybe there are security guards outside, maybe there's loud music, and it seems like it's a bit of a web to figure out, are they allowed to be there? Are they allowed to serve alcohol? Is the place permitted to allow them to serve alcohol? So that's where it seems like this is though this is just this liquor law affects so many agencies that normally don't have to communicate on such an immediate basis. Because before the law, we had some challenges keeping up with speakeasies, but now it seems it'll be a little more challenging. So that's why the database and the communications and understanding and even the hours, are the hours deemed by just, because like each alcohol licensee has a usually negotiated hours of operation, but does this catering permit hours to just go straight to 2 a.m. regardless of what their license says?
I believe they still cannot serve after midnight. I don't think that changed, but the 5 hours. So if they wanted to start at 7 in the morning to midnight, that's permissible.
But midnight's the cutoff.
I believe, and I can verify, but I'm sure that still remained the same. Yeah, midnight.
Okay. And so do any of the there is no orange placard involved with a catering license, but if there is hypothetically a repeat offender with their catering permit, what are the steps for intervention there? Is there anything on the neighborhood level? Or does that all happen at a regulating agency level?
So I think I can approach it this way. I think Mike can probably, Mike Dever can probably jump in here. If there's several violations where citations are issued, maybe selling one, without a license. Licenses in Philadelphia renew every October, or every 2 years in October. And this year licensees are renewing. If we have the opportunity to evaluate a licensee's operational history for the 2 years prior. So if there are citations that meet certain criteria or police activity, that is something we can look at during the time of renewal. So that is another opportunity that we reach out to the police departments, district attorneys, the legislators, which I'm actually doing in the next couple weeks. I will be reaching out liquor control enforcement for potential candidates that we can review. So if you do have repeat offenders, not abusing their licensing privilege, that's something we can look at time of renewal. And then that could affect future off-premise permits as well.
Excellent. And before I go to Supervisor Dever, did you want to add anything, Mick? I didn't know if I.
Oh, I think Tisha covered it well. I don't have any additions unless there's another curveball to throw at us. Not that you threw curveballs, Eleanor.
I'm checking the questions. They might come from the chat, but as we I'm checking here. It says from Jonathan Wall, is there a place where all the agencies' challenge processes are posted? Neighbors wanting to challenge these permits will need something to reference given how complex the rules are. So
And again, I
did answer that, but it's a work in progress. Is that correct?
Yeah. What my hope is if you look on our public website, you can pull up a licensee, an address, zip code, and get a list of licenses. What my hope is, right now you can see if someone has a conditional licensing agreement, an amusement permit, a Sunday sales permit. I at least am trying to get where you can see if they have an off-premise catering. Now it's linking that to where those permits are is what I'm trying to work on. So at least the hope is that you can at least see if they actually have one or not. This umbrella.
Lynn Gotti also asked, which I think you did cover, but we can mention again, where are the placards displayed? The business itself, the extended location, or both?
So the placard should be posted where the temporary extension, the outside area where it is to be licensed. So if it's in an empty parking lot or a field, if it's a stake in the ground with a placard taped to it, as long as it's continuously posted and visible to the passing public, but it should be where the extension is to take place. Now, we have had a few licensees that may cover that 1,000 feet. So we have sent them more than one placard. So it's posted in a few different places. So like you said, this could cover 2 blocks. So we want to make sure everyone's made aware of that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And Sonia Lee asks, is there no way to know if a restaurant has applied for a catering permit?
You can email our account. We can certainly let you know if we do, but again, that's what I'm working on as far as the system.
And one of the things I would say about that, and I obviously know why you're asking, can you check if a certain restaurant has an off-premise catering permit, and it's important. The issue can fundamentally come down to is that while you think a catered event might be the restaurant next to you, it could be from across town. So that might not necessarily be who you might be going after the wrong person, because you're not necessarily going to know who's hosting that.
And quite frankly, it could be out of the city. It could be someone from Montgomery County having an event, or someone from Pittsburgh having an event in Philadelphia. So it's not just, they're not territorial.
The catering permits.
Yeah.
they're not bound by any kind of geographical
Traffic, no.
limitation.
Now,
Right.
if you want to get married in a farm in Lancaster County, you want to hire your local restaurant and they have a permit, they can travel it with them. So they're not bound by that. I just
Okay.
didn't want the thought process to be, there's a catered event in my neighborhood. I know it's this restaurant. Now that might happen, but it's not always a guarantee.
I see. Well, thank you so much. They're probably not the end of the questions, but I will go over to Supervisor Dever and ask you, so everybody's clear about liquor control enforcement, or LCE, what issues is your agency charged with dealing with?
Yes, I just want to add one thing to what Tish said. If people have a problem with posting, or if they have a problem with, where to protest and how they go about that, we get calls about that all the time. So we send them over to the LCB basically, because they deal with the issues in regard, if the posting's not up, we don't go and check. They have their own people to go out and the analysts to go out and check that. So we don't have any real power per se. We will direct them that way. The same thing, we also get, a lot of times we'll get protests sent to us or called in concerning places. We don't handle the protests at all. That's handled through legal with the LCB also. So that's a big thing that we constantly have. And I know Tish has touched on that, but I just wanted to more or less bring that in clear. So, so people, they don't have to misdirect. They can just directly go to the LCB on those issues, because they have all the people that handle that type of situation.
And that's why it's good to know the difference, what issues you handle. They're not management issues ahead of time. They're usually after the fact, correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
But what we do basically is the general things we deal with are administrative investigations and criminal investigations. Administrative investigations dealing with licensed premises, which are usually generated by citizens' complaints or allegations about certain places. And we handle them in either an undercover capacity or an open end capacity. In those investigations, we have the ability to cite the premises, and that will eventually go to court, in that vein. The criminal investigations usually involve the speakeasies, which there seems to be a big surge, as you just said earlier, in speakeasy investigations. People think of the term as, being from the, many years ago, and the old thoughts they have of seeing them in movies and stuff. But it's really, to say a speakeasy is just this: it's a person that's selling alcohol without a license. It could be in a home, it could be in a business. We encounter all different. We just had one last night, matter of fact, in Haverford. Work with the Haverford Township Police Department on that one place out there. So that's why I said, so there's all types, but that's where the criminal investigations come in, and that goes through the court system. That doesn't go through the administrative law judge or the LCB. That's a separate thing that goes through the county, down City Hall from Philadelphia. So that's the two things. And like I said, the other part, the administrative, is more for the licensees that have a valid license to sell alcohol. They're okay to do it, but we have certain rules and regulations of vermins that they have to follow. And if they don't follow them, then they get charged according to that.
Just out of curiosity, in situations where someone or a group are not licensed to sell alcohol but are selling alcohol, what evidence does LCE use in their criminal investigation before it goes to court? And I ask you this because sometimes it's as blazing as social media promotion for the place, for the liquor, despite having no licensing whatsoever. Do you use social media evidence in your cases?
It can't be used as evidence, but it can start an investigation. If one of our officers observe it, or if somebody in the community observes it, calls in the complaint, which usually happens, Yes, we can do that, but the advertisement of it doesn't really, it has nothing to do with the case itself per se, because it's just that it's an advertisement until you see the activity happening. And that's why, like with speakeasies, we have to have an undercover officer go in and actually observe what's going on and make sure that, it's the purchase of alcohol or, at a bar or whatever. Now, what a lot of people don't know, or it seems to become a fact in some of the places we have, is some people are not aware that if you charge a cover charge to get into a premises and you're giving away free alcohol inside the place, that is a speakeasy, because you had to pay money to get to the alcohol, even though the alcohol was free. This has happened, and it happened in many cases recently. They figure if they say free alcohol, as they do in the advertisements you're talking about, that's okay because it's free, but you have to pay a $10 or $20 cover charge to get there. The courts have determined that money that you pay to get in there, okay, is concerned as part of the price of the alcohol. If you can enter free, and easy, you go in, not pay anything, you go to the alcohol and, purchase it, or not purchase it, but consume it or whatever, get to it, that's fine. But if there's any money that's taken before that, it's considered a speakeasy. So we have those type of places too.
Susan Burke Collins asks, is liquor control enforcement increasing patrols? What is the staffing situation?
In regards to increasing patrols for what? These activities?
I guess for investigations as speakeasies are on the uptick.
We've increased details that have, we know this, especially in Philadelphia, there's been a big increase in speakeasies. And we do increase raids that we have and stuff like that. There's been an increase, yes. People, we're like every other law enforcement agency. We're trying to staff as well as we can. I don't think we're not at full staffing. But I know that they're ever increasing to try to put classes in. We do have people that have recently come on the job, and trainees and stuff like that, training classes that we have, and applications is not open now, but they open frequently for our job. But yeah, I would say that, it's, yes, we do know there's an increase in activity, and there's been an increase with us checking for them and citing them and arresting for them, actually. Not everything makes the press.
This is good to know. It's very good to know. And as Tisha said, and I do believe I heard you say, a lot of this is augmented by neighbor reports and
Yes.
and feeding both agencies information about what people are observing, down the block in their neighborhood. We actually, Queen Village Neighbors Association has an alcohol license nuisance reporting form on our website, and we send it to the regulating bodies, one of which is LCE, and it's not, I believe it's Officer Farrow now, but to keep you abreast, but is another good option going through your representative or your senator to funnel this information to you? What is the best way to receive information, would you say?
Well, we have our own hotline here. We also have a hotline that goes to Harrisburg, but when we've had community meetings and such, we always tell them they can call our number here. I can give you that number right now if you want. It's 215-218-2320. I think you might already have that number, I believe, right?
Probably, but I will ask if Lucy can help me out and put that in the chat. That would be fantastic. And while I'm at it, I'm sorry.
You were saying that how do we get those complaints? That mostly people do call in. That's how we usually get those complaints, that the people do call in, and most of our work is generated from patron or from people complaining, public complaining on places.
it's a lot to do, but it sounds like there is a game plan, and it's in partnership with everyday people and as I said, your fellow agencies, and it's been really important to know and make the distinction between a non-criminal and a criminal investigation. So suspicions of a speakeasy should be aired as quickly as possible.
Yes, yes. And you were saying earlier about legislators and different sources, like who do they contact? We do also act on complaints we have from, your offices and stuff. When you get your people complaining to you, that's usually funneled to us. And it's usually, it's usually through your office or one of the other offices that they do that. So we do take them in complaints too. I mean, no matter which way you would do it, they all come in here. And people can complain, they can give their name and we'll contact them and keep that confidential. Or they can remain anonymous. A lot of people think that if they don't want to complain because they don't want to give their name, and they figure that we won't act on it without a name. We will. We do all complaints, whether they're anonymous or whether they actually have a name. And like I said, if they have a name, we do contact the person and we do see if we get any more information. And they are contacted at the end of the investigation to let them know how the investigation turned out. But if they go anonymous, we will still investigate. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for that information. And if any more questions come up in the chat, I'll be definitely sure to circle around to you. And I do want to say before we move on to Lieutenant Long, commander of the South Street Mini Station, Tish or Mick, if there was information, we had talked about a website and a phone number that could go in the chat if people wanted to call in about questions or check an area restaurant or alcohol license. I believe you said that was possible. Not the extensive database we had discussed before, but questions about certain licensing.
Sure. Yeah, I will get I'll provide two different resource accounts. One is for general licensing questions. Does XYZ have a valid license, and or can you advise if they have a off-premise catering permit? And then I also have a resource account for nuisance bar activity. Now we do, like I said, we work closely with liquor enforcement and police departments, district attorney's office, when we'll canvass the legislators as well. So my suggestion, not just liquor enforcement, but to also keep your local police departments, because that's where we get a lot of our information.
Excellent. If you can put any of that information in the chat for people, I greatly appreciate it. And
yeah,
thank you. Lieutenant Long, welcome. People are excited to hear from you and your opinion on this. For transparency and comparison, can you share some challenges in managing the business district from the police perspective before the passage of Act 81 and after, considering it went into effect November 5th, I believe it was, 2021?
Yeah, thanks, Eleanor. For those of you who don't know, I'm Lieutenant Michael Long, South Street Command. I've been down here since midsummer of 2018. Before I get into that answer, Eleanor, as far as the catering license, is there going to be a physical copy if bar X gives storefront Y, that's where they're catering? And if I have to do an invest premise check at a clothing store that's operating that might be a speakeasy, is there a physical copy or a point of contact available from the actual liquor establishment? I don't know if Tish could get that or.
So so they should still have a physical piece of paper at the location. So they should be able to show you, yes, I can be here and here's my permit.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
like that would that be at the location where the permit's being used or the home base?
It should be with where they are, where the event's taking place. It should be. Whether licensee does or not, it's hard, because it might not be the licensee that's there. If they have servers there, that maybe, if it's not the licensee themselves, but they should have some type of approval letter showing that they have the authority to be there.
Right. Because my concern wasn't so much what this bill is well intended for, as far as like a wedding or a party going on down the street. It's people utilizing it for, malfeasant reasons. And if I have a violation on a certain storefront, if I don't have a physical copy or what bar they got it from, how can we violate it back to the restaurant? So I don't know if that's a requirement or not. So that's an area of concern for me.
So again, it's about understanding how information is shared to be able to, so Lieutenant Long can effectually either cite or confirm that it's okay, whatever's going on there. It's that gray area of all of these things have been done online, but who's got the documentation and who's allowed to be there, and like are businesses allowed to like sell their permit for one night to someone else to use? It's
Absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not.
Okay.
so as far as them having something, as Lieutenant Long asked, they either may or may not have something hard copy.
They should, and I can get a sample copy of a letter if that would be helpful and pass along. So you know what you're looking for, if you would.
All right, thank you. Because like I said, I've been doing bar checks and checking permits for a while, and
Sure.
coming on a secondary location, I just want to make sure I know it went back to bar X and not bar Y, so I know who actually gave it to them. But to answer your question there, Eleanor, for the original part, some of the challenges we had on South Street with this district, like I said, I've been here since 18. Friday and Saturday nights, a lot of intoxicated people, early on since I've been here, large fights, drunk individuals. And summer nights, there's 10,000 people down here at certain times. Some of the food spots, a few years ago would stay open at 3 or 4 in the morning, just as we're trying to get the crowds out of here. Other people from across this, tri-state area are showing up to get their slice of pizza or, whatever they want. Since then, though, well, before I go since then, we did have some violent incidents as far as shootings on the block. One particular I'll talk about happened last year when a gentleman on the block pulled a handgun and pointed it at 4 bike officers patrolling on the 400 block. That man was just here, wasn't going to any establishment or anything like that. The man was apprehended without injury. It was a great job all the way around. But that just shows where I need to keep my focus targeting more of the violent offenses. So with the task force meeting we have monthly, it really does benefit that L&I's here, liquor control, stuff like that, because as far as businesses operating as a nuisance property, basically we're just documenting what we see, forming a packet on them and passing it on to L&I and liquor control. We take place in compliance checks to ensure everything's going on with the health department. Again, L&I, LCE. It's going pretty well. Since then, moving forward, last year we had that pilot pedestrian program that quelled a lot of quality of life issues as far as nuisance vehicles coming down, groups of people parking and not going into any of the stores and just hanging out, basically tailgating. We implemented different parking with parking authority to relocate cars after certain hours. So all that's been quelling people who come down here who are problematic. And towards the end of last summer, we actually seen families still hanging out into the, early evening into after dark. So it was having a very positive effect. And it's a credit, basically, like I believe Mick said about the communication going back and forth. Our task force, it works well. We get bar 1, 2, 3 is acting up. We look into it. My officers spot something, the supervisor checks it, myself checks it. If it's a problem next month, we come to you during that task force with the state senator and all participating parties. So moving forward, it's going well. Obviously, at the beginning of my statement, I addressed my major concern as far as this goes, but I haven't seen a negative impact since it passed either. I do see some storefronts that catch my eye on the weekend, on a late night, when everybody on the block's closed, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's 3 people hanging out, or more than 3 people hanging out in front of an establishment for some other reason wouldn't be open, and there's no signs of criminal activity as far as burglaries or anything going. So that will heighten our awareness. But this catering thing, like I said, as long as it's trackable, like I said, if bar A, if they're not going to be held responsible or not on location or the paperwork's not there, how do I know whose license is actually going to get hit? But it's the teamwork thing. And like I said, this meeting's going well. Our task force go well. Nothing's jumping up, but I have to keep my focus to keep the violence down on this block. And there's multiple avenues that we're doing to keep that. So getting this to L&I, getting it to LCE, getting it to the health department, that's been very beneficial.
Excellent. And it does seem a little unbelievable that a place holding with an alcohol permit off premises doesn't have to provide documentation if it gets unruly or something, or the police need to come and request that just to verify it's legit. Is that something that's going to be enforced, or it seems to incapacitate those efforts there, Tish or Milk?
I think if I'm understanding, and probably Mike Dever would probably need to jump in here, but are you asking if the activity that's occurring at the off-premise catering site is enforced and or can be
legal? Like is again, worst case scenario, Lieutenant Long observes people at a place that sells, coffee mugs and not alcohol, not a bar, but they're hanging out, it's late at night. If you were to approach, which I guess I don't know how it's executed, but basically saying, is there alcohol being served? If there is, can I see your permit to be able to do this? Since this isn't a registered bar. No, well, we're having a birthday party. Well, where's the documentation? Do they have to have that to be able to hand it over to the officers or not? Because I thought I heard that they didn't have to provide that hard copy piece of paper that Lieutenant Long was asking about, saying on such and such a night, this place is permitted by bar X to serve alcohol at this birthday party.
Well, when
Mike,
we've done our investigations and times that we've worked them, we've always asked for that piece of paper that you're talking about there. We've always thought, and I don't know if Tish explained that or we always thought that they had to have it posted in the premises. And if they don't, we tell them, they have to get a copy of it. You don't close them down. But see, we have the ability to go in through our computers to find out if they've actually been issued it. So, or if the office, from the paperwork that they give us. But sometimes we'll go to a place where we don't have anything or anything like that. We know ahead of time that they don't have anything there. But like the lieutenant was saying, you know, he's going into a place where he might just suspect it at that time. And we do the same thing. We see it going on. We'll go in, we'll ask them for that permit. They're supposed to, we always thought that they're supposed to post that. So, and if they don't have it posted, we can usually check on it. If they don't have it posted, we can't cite them for anything. There's no violation per se, but we tell them that it's a requirement that they have to have it posted.
Yeah, and
So-
I guess, and I apologize if that wasn't clear. They should be able to produce something. Now, whether they do or not, I don't, as Mike just said, I don't think it's a violation if they don't hand it over, but if they are holding an event and don't have that permit, that's a different story. But they should be able to produce something, and it should be at the premise. Again, if the licensee itself didn't pass it along to the servers, that doesn't mean it's not a valid event, I guess I should say.
On South Street, we got a pretty good relationship with the business district, the head house district, and a lot of our drinking establishment and bars. So anytime I do a check at them locations, yeah, I know where, you know, the liquor license is posted, this is posted. Like I said, my concern was just a secondary location that's not primary alcohol. Not the extension of premises, but more along the catering to justify. But it sounds like we'll cross that when that comes to light.
So Lieutenant Long, as you outlined, there's a lot to handle. It's a major corridor in a major big city. What have you found that works as far as involvement or support in reporting stuff, letting you know any whether it's from agencies or individuals about potential speakeasies? What support have you found that works? Is there anything that's lacking? Of course, not, besides the obvious of, you know, more officers on the street, but what since we have this kind of collaborative group together now, and we've got community members listening, what best would help you and your officers in managing not only your everyday things, but now the potential for misuse of Act 81?
Well, what's worked so far is really the relationship with the bars and the businesses on the block. Like I said, I've going on for some years here. Some of my officers have been here 20, 25 years. They know, you know, the ins and out. Something looks off, something looks, you know, normal. You know, there's tells like that I get from my officers. Neighbors lived here their whole life. They'll email, call, go to a PSA meeting, go to the link on the QVNA site saying, hey, this seems a little odd. And we talk about it monthly. It's a matter of just keeping that partnership together and everybody showing up for when an address does get on our radar. Resources are available of who's actually going to check on it, you know, because like you said, other than more officers, what do I need? Everybody's shorthanded right now. So we keep our targets more, you know, to the safety of the business district and, you know, the neighborhood around it. I don't see our businesses giving us a hard way about anything, but like they said, these catering permits could come from anywhere in the state. And it's just, you know, like I said, I don't have a problem with the extension of premises. I don't have a problem with anything really. It's just a matter of, you know, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as who's enforcing what. Like I said, if you see something, I hate to say it, say something, you know what I mean? Put it on the website, call the tip line, call the mini, do 6-7, or is it the Bowie 685 tips, you know, whatever you need to do. Because other than LCE and this task force, which state police work extremely closely with, our citywide vice, they look at speakeasies along that, but they also do it more not in a licensed area, you know, so they have their own partnership going on as far as PPD goes. Patrol function, we have to do it a little different. You know, we're not a specialized unit. We're not citywide vice. The only liaison I have other than, you know, Sergeant Fred is this monthly meeting I have with head house, state senators, LCE, all them other connections. And that's where we get most of our stuff done.
To both you, Lieutenant Long and Tisha, maybe even Mick, Audrey Fox put it very well. She asked, do you have any plans for digital verification that might make it easier to verify permits in the moment?
Well, I'll answer and then exit this real quick. It's going to be a matter of equipment for us. And I work nights and weekends mostly. So a lot of my connections are Monday to Friday day work through the city. I'm not quite sure if the city's moving forward with that nightlife manager or corroboration that they talked about a while ago, having representatives working night to address quality of life issues or nuisance bars. If that comes along, great. If it doesn't, it's going to be a delayed response from me.
I can say we were lucky enough to get QR codes put on our licenses. But again, this was, the passing of this was not expected, especially as quickly as it came. So even if we would put it on, again, just like the lieutenant said, it's equipment for enforcement to even utilize any digital verification as well. So I thought we were fortunate enough just to get it on our licenses. So not off the table, but
Exactly.
if I can just get it in, my priority now is just getting it listed on the website so it's easily referenced.
Thank you, Tisha. And Lieutenant Long, one of your, I guess, one of the key partners for enforcement along the district comes from LNI. And we're very lucky to have Renee Reinhardt here tonight to talk to us about the role that LNI plays. As you see, this is a multi-layered collaborative in dealing with problems related to alcohol, from LCD to LCE to our police, and they also the use of LNI and their ability to impose enforcement. And Renee, I'll hand it over to you because I had a bunch of questions about what were the scenarios for liquor license and catering permits, and where LNI comes in to be sure that where they're being placed is even licensed. And you did such a better job of explaining it to me when we communicated earlier, that I'll just let you talk about how LNI handles that by the time Lieutenant Long comes to you and says, I think we've got an issue.
Okay, so for the catering permits, there is a bit of a concern there only because if a liquor licensee can, have their off-premise permit and go into the city and say they're going to have an event here or there, that would only be a concern for us if it's like Lieutenant Long mentioned, like if it's in a clothing store. Well, typically you wouldn't be able to have an event like that in a clothing store. It's not permitted. So unless that clothing store owner got a permit for that day and came to LNI and applied for a one-day permit and said they'd like permission to host an event here, and that permit was granted, then theoretically the liquor licensee could host an event there, or they could have an event there where liquor and food is served because it's allowed for that one day. So I think our concern would be just to make sure that the event is taking place at a location where that's permitted. But we wouldn't know about it unless there was a complaint put in. And by the time we get the complaint, the event may have already happened, or it might be taking place then, and we might not be able to respond to it. So that's where, applying for a one-day event permit might come into play, because then we'd be able to determine beforehand that this is going to take place, and then concerned neighbors could be informed that this event is going to take place this day from this time to that time or whatever. So it just might not be, it might be that we don't get the information in time to actually do anything about it.
So what would tip people off to a potential speakeasy situation? Are we talking blacked out windows, music? Are third-party promoters allowed? What's when I think my main goal is to not only equip neighbors with the information, but also help them not prematurely assume something's operating illegally. So what are some of the telltale signs? And when you get information, what steps do you take?
So in my experience, the neighborhood complaints are the best because the neighbors know what's going on in their neighborhoods and what might be newly introduced to the neighborhood they kind of have questions about. When we get speakeasy complaints, it's typically because there's loud music, there's more cars parked in the area, there may be people showing up to a location late at night, like including after other bars and restaurants have closed. There could be blacked out windows or boarded out windows just so that nobody can easily see what's going on inside. There may be armed security outside. There could be, well, most likely there are surveillance cameras at the property so that the operators can see who's coming up to the door or the gate. We've seen situations where there's a roll down gate and the gate is lifted when known people come up so that they can enter the establishment. But if you're not known to them, they won't open the gate. And a big part of it is social media as well. People promote on social media to come to this location for a party where more than likely liquor is going to be sold. But in order to know where the location is, you have to either be following them on social media or send them a direct message or something like that. So they can be pretty savvy in operating a speakeasy because they know what they can do to prevent law enforcement from just coming right in. So our process when we get a speakeasy complaint is to research the location, to see what zoning permits there may be, if there are any licenses. I'll send my weekend team to the location on the weekend to see if there's anything going on, if they can kind of determine what the activity level might be, what time they might be operating. I make a referral to Citywide Vice to see if this particular address is on their radar. Occasionally I reach out to LCE as well to see if the location has a liquor license or if it's on their radar. And that usually triggers one or both agencies to start an investigation. They'll try to send an undercover officer in to see if they can purchase liquor. And then best case scenario, we all team up for a joint inspection and go and do a raid at the speakeasy. And L&I's role is to do an inspection to see any fire code violations and to post the cease operations for the illegal operation. So that's how we handle speakeasies, and we've been the most effective when all the agencies can work together. L&I just putting a cease on the location may not stop the activity at all because they can just go back in, their liquor is still there, cameras are still there, cash register is still there. So it's more beneficial to have the law enforcement agencies because they can actually confiscate the items related to the speakeasy.
You did mention for a venue, a commercial business that isn't normally a site for a party where alcohol be served, they can get a 1-day permit from L&I to operate that day. But if that's not the case, what is the permit that a place would need to be like an entertainment or rented venue?
So it's possible for somebody to apply for a 1-day permit. Doesn't mean they're going to get it. They could try.
Oh,
It has happened sometimes and then other times not. So I think for the types of venues where you would need it would be a legally zoned catering hall or banquet hall, nightclub, or even a restaurant may be able to host an event like that. trying to think. There have been situations where maybe like the free library has had an event and they applied for permits to be able to host events that day. So it just depends. It just depends.
So the zoning is the first, like that has to be, the zoning designation has to be allowable for that. And then a special license would be needed if it wanted to go over 50 people? Like a
Yes,
special occupancy?
they would need the special assembly occupancy license. Yes.
Okay.
That's provided that food and drinks are going to be served and there's going to be a live entertainment component as well.
Lastly, is there anything with L&I with regards to blacked out windows? Is there
So-
is that a violation of anything anywhere on a commercial boulevard, on a commercial corridor?
Mhm.
You would expect to see window displays or see into something, or it's kind of part of what being a business is all about. Is that a violation in and of itself?
So that is concerning, and I'll have to get back to you because I'm not 100% sure. I know that there's a violation if you are, let's just say, a convenience store and you have your windows covered with advertisements. So I would imagine that it could be a violation, but I have to check and just to be sure and get back to you.
Excellent, excellent. I thank you very much, Renee. And if any more questions, as always, come up in the chat, I will circle back around to you. But I do want to go to Mike Harris, Executive Director of the South Street Head House Business District, who we all work with together on the Nightlife Task Force that Lieutenant Long mentioned. What are the safeguards that the district is taking as far as educating businesses? Now, I know that you also testified at the city council hearing for the tenant protection legislation that went into effect, where commercial landlords have to provide the zoning information for what is and is not allowed at those different locations. Have you found that there's any follow-up that's been placed on you, whether it's necessary or proactive, into making sure any and all businesses know about what the expectations are?
Thanks, Eleanor. So the law that you're referring to actually takes effect on Friday. So it takes effect officially on March 18th, 2022. But it was introduced by Cheryl Parker in December, signed by the mayor in January. So it is a commercial leasing notice we think is really good, and that's why we supported it and testified on it. Basically, it requires any commercial property owner to notify and provide a notice of the property zoning prior to entering into a lease, or that lease is, there's ramifications if they don't do that. So it's basically to give a commercial tenant awareness of the zoning restrictions or overlays or anything. So they're not just on South Street, although it happens there, but it happens throughout the city. They sign leases, multi-year leases, and get locked in, and then find out what they intended to do. They've got to go through a zoning process with the RCOs and other things like that. So we did have one business recently that I think folks are aware of on 4th Street that happened. They signed a lease, they opened a place, they may have operated for a week or two, and then they got shut down. They're not coming back, but they didn't have the proper zoning. So this puts the burden on the property owners to give notice and awareness to any potential tenant. We think that's going to help out a lot in creating information. Our job as the district, we're not an enforcement agency. I say that often and frequently. People think we are, but we're not. We provide information. We send this commercial leasing notice out, this information out to our businesses and all our businesses and property owners through our newsletters. We create awareness of it. And that's what we can do. And if anybody contacts us, we'll advise them. But that's a long-winded answer to what we're trying to do. And we think this is a good step, a good regulation and law to have in place.
And you are very proactive, and it's, as you said, you can be proactive and just not to be mistaken as an enforcement agency in any way, shape, or form. But it's a collaborative effort between everybody. So it's appreciated that you helped testify, and that was passed, because it's one more safeguard that everybody knows what the expectations are.
Yeah, there's an overlay, there's use variances that are required, and zoning variances, and I've had more than a handful of businesses that, find their surprise what they intended was not allowed, and it causes a lot of headaches and goes through a lot of process that doesn't help the business, and they put money out and get locked into things. So yeah, I think this should solve a lot of headaches. And we do work with all the enforcement agencies, like Lieutenant said, on Nightlife Task Force, and we're very engaged with it. It's just, our best role is to provide information and awareness to our stakeholders.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. And lastly, I want to loop in the view from Harrisburg. As a baseline, all communities, regardless of where they're located, desire to be clean and safe, and supporting a commercial corridor at the state level, at the city level, and even at the local civic level is only going to help a neighborhood be vibrant. But as we've discussed tonight, if that support produces opportunities for bad actors to take advantage of the very good intention of these temporary laws, or act in a manner to overwhelm regulating agencies, LCE, Lieutenant Long and his crew at the South Street mini station, then there has to be a balancing mechanism for neighbors' concerns to be heard. So how can your offices provide that balancing mechanism? Representative Isaacson, I'm going to start with you. You do sit on the House Liquor Committee. Both you and Senator Saval did vote for this. It is good. The intentions are good. And we want to help everybody rebound from the pandemic and its setbacks. Where does the balance come into play here?
Sure. Well, thank you. And I do want to give out a shout out to my chief of staff, Samantha, who works on this relentlessly with all of you. As we have the highest concentration of liquor licenses, it's always been one of my big focuses. And prior to being the elected, I was obviously a staffer who worked on this for decades. And I will say that with the speakeasy issue, we really do need to think about how to loop in the district attorney's office on this, because in my prior as staff, when we dealt with some speakeasies, it was definitely the district attorney's office taking these violations to the judge, so that the judge was able to put an enforcement action in and be able to assist with the where you had a longer process through the due process system for appeals. There are the ability of the courts to come in and put a stop to it in the here and now, should you have L&I, the local police, and LCE all on the same page in the enforcement. So that's something we will look forward to talking about more. But we're here talking about Act 81, and this is a long process. A lot of these ideas that came in this bill started during the pandemic, and some of them were tinkering with issues that were prior, but it certainly came to the forefront. It's always easier on the backside to forget where we all were back in 2020 and 2021. And this bill it was numerous bills that got passed in the House that kind of got consolidated, and we had an omnibus bill come out in the Senate, and it was pretty rushed through. With regard to the extension of premise, the 1,000-foot, Tisha recognized when she talked about parking lots. we have to make these laws for the entire state, where I'd love to keep it just here in the People's Republic of Philadelphia. We are attached to 67 other counties, and these laws apply to every licensee around the entire Commonwealth. So when you have a big roadhouse with a big parking lot and people wanted to be safe, remember this was in the fall last year when Delta was rearing its head and people wanted to still be able to eat outdoors. That's kind of where some of these ideas came from. We know that there are going to be challenges because us in the city are much more condensed, but we're going to see how it works out. And if we have to go back, I'm sure that the senator will support me on his side where if we have to tinker with this where we can. But let's, there was give and take with this. This bill was needed to keep the outdoor streeteries open. They were going to be shut down. And I don't know whether a lot of people remember it, but that's what we were up against. And what we had to give up in this that we didn't get out were the drinks to go, which had kept so many restaurants alive. So, would I have liked to have a much longer negotiation? Sure. But you want to know what? It's 90 to 112. My party has 90. This was passing. And we got to try and get whatever we could in it that would be beneficial to the city. And we'll continue working on this. I do sit on the liquor committee, and I'm quite a vocal voice for anybody who really knows me. I'm not quiet or shy. So we're going to try and do our best as we wade through this. My office, since Samantha convenes the task forces, and whenever you ask her to, she's got it put together immediately, and we try and get, poor Mick, he doesn't even want my office calling him anymore. We call so much. But, we're here and we are understanding that we have to figure out the best way to handle this as we move forward. And again, it was made temporary for a reason. When this passed, it was at, the end of last year. People were afraid to be inside. There was no indoor dining, that we had all these different things going on. And there was a reason it was made temporary. And so we're just going to have to work our way through it. And, again, we're always there supporting. And if we need to try and go for a legislative fix when we find out what is egregious, we will. And it's easy to sit here on a Zoom and talk about the worst case scenarios, because we can sit here for, the rest of the night and bring up worst case scenario. But there are restrictions, some of these off-premise catering, it's like the Shad Fest down at Penn Treaty Park in the spring. It goes through a nonprofit. It goes to, it's somebody having something at the German Society that doesn't have a liquor license, they bring it in. There are restrictions and applications to it. So let's continue all working together and try and do the best. And again, I'm happy to go back for a legislative fix if there's something that we find that we can't get through the temporary time period and see where we're at.
I think the overriding theme this evening has been the fact that it's not the law that's the problem, it's just the management that's concerning. And this is an excellent step to show how, if there is communication and it's made easy and facile, then any problems that arise will be more easily quashed if necessary. And as far as a tweak, it sounds, from listening to everybody, it sounds like the exchange of information is probably one of the bottlenecks right now. And the being able to get information from LCB about who has what to LCE when Lieutenant Long needs to know if this is valid, if this is able to operate. So maybe it's the database applications and the dissemination of that information and would ease up that bottleneck. And I was really impressed to hear from everybody, and as your office is always open to neighbor input, that's really what helps everybody is this communication and letting letting your representative, your state senator, your lieutenant, your people at LCE and LCB, here's what we're seeing. Here's what the problem is. Can you help us? What should we do? Elle and I, Renee has a very good handle on everything too. So everything coming together has been really impressive, smoothing out the communication lines. I don't know if that's a tweak. I don't know if that's money into into equipment. I'm not, that's your level.
Isn't
We
it
can
so
all
much fun? We're going into the budget.
because I don't know who could answer this on this call, because from the city we just have police. We have Councilman Squilla and Streeteries coming up next month, but Susan Burke Collins asked, can we have the local ordinances that satisfy city concerns, or is it a preemption problem? I'm not.
Is it possible for me to jump in right here, Eleanor?
Oh, sure, George. I'm not sorry. I was going to introduce you next.
No,
George,
it's
for staff for
No,
Senator
no.
Saval. Please do.
I really appreciate the way you framed the discussion tonight, Eleanor, and the way you framed this question for Rep. Isaacson and our office, in that it really was a bill that passed unanimously in both houses, because we recognized we were in this dire situation, and we wanted to make sure that we kept our small businesses and the service industry workers that we have in our our beautiful city. 5 Beard Award nominees today that just came out, for those that didn't see it. And we're lucky in Queen Village to be surrounded by some of the most amazing restaurants in the country, let alone the city of Philadelphia. Recognizing that there's always administrative difficulties in implementing some of these things. And just like Rep. Isaacson said, and just like you've said, Eleanor, and just like everyone here has said, we all talk to each other all the time. I need to also shout out Samantha Pearson and Rep. Isaacson's entire office for what they do to lead the nightlife task force for South Street. We meet every 2 months. And we discuss these things at each of those meetings. That's the best thing that folks can do going forward, is let us know what's going on. It's great to hear that Lieutenant Long hasn't seen an uptick in any issues so far. This law has been in effect in 4 years, or for 4 months. And part of the law has been in effect for most of the past 2 years, right? The extension of premises is not new. That was just codifying a emergency regulation that was passed in 2020. So that allows for the streeteries. And I know we've gotten a lot of streetery questions here. The streetery questions, and this is, I think, important, what Act 81 does cover and what it doesn't, is the streetery issues that most folks may be concerned about are exclusively a city issue, right? The state is simply authorizing that liquor can be sold in that area. Sorry, Senator Saval is coming back from Harrisburg appropriations meeting, so he has me in 3 meetings, as you can see right now, doing what we can. So there's actually an opportunity right now to talk about those regulations, because those regulations was just in the Inquirer today, right? Those regulations are being debated right now with the administration, with Councilmember Dom. But I just want to emphasize what everyone said as well. I was, personally, I know the senator was personally happy that this legislation passed, because it was so important for our small businesses and restaurants. We recognize that there are enforcement issues. We're here. Our district office just opened at 6th and Washington, so about 50 feet outside of QVNA, outside of QVNA catchment. I'm a Queen Village resident. I live at 5th and Carpenter, so I hope to see many of you around. You can always reach out to our office, and you should always.
That's actually one thing I wanted to ask you about, as we talk about tweaking or engagement with the community and the boots on the ground, the neighbors that live on the block or around the corner. Would a petition to intervene be filed with your office if an individual wanted to do it?
So Mick can correct me here. But petitions to intervene are usually around liquor license transfers, right?
So, yeah, you end up with the extension of premises, you can file the petition and or the protest, depending on which avenue you're going, how you qualify. but it's on the extension of premises. It's not the main restaurant that you're able to challenge. That's already been decided and been approved. So it's only that limited scope of where you're coming at.
Yeah, when when the licensee comes up for renewal, if there is an issue.
That's different. That's where we
when
go nuisance bar.
We filed, as Tish was saying, that's coming up
Mhm.
this year. So if there's an issue that we can help with that, we do get reached out to about that.
So petitions to intervene can be filed with either with you, Representative Isaacson, or with Senator Saval's office, or is it?
They get filed with LCE, but our office can do it in conjunction with you.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Just
Okay.
letting people know.
No
So, as we have surpassed the 8 o'clock hour, and you were also wonderful to come tonight and give us an hour and a half of your time to explain to neighbors how Act 81 works, what they need to be aware of, and what's going to be happening. And it was very important to read throughout all our discussions that communication is the linchpin in everything. So again, to everybody, as Lieutenant Long said, if you see something, say something. You can go through the Liquor Control Board, you can go through Liquor Control Enforcement, you can go through Representative Isaacson's office, Senator Saval's office, you can contact QVNA or use our nuisance reporting tool. And we will continue to help South Street Head House District thrive and make Act 81 work in every way that it was intended to be. I want to thank everybody, and I'm going to do that very quickly. Michael Vigoda, again from LCB, Tisha Albert from LCB, Supervisor Michael Dever from Bureau of Liquor Control Enforcement, Lieutenant Michael Long from the South Street Mini Station, Renee Reinhardt, Supervisor for Code Enforcement at License and Inspections, Mike Harris, Executive Director of the South Street Head House Business District, Representative Mary Isaacson, and George Donnelly, Chief of Staff for State Senator Nikhil Saval. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. We really appreciate it. And we'll see our neighbors back here again next month, when we're discussing streeteries with Councilman Squilla. And
Thank you so much, Eleanor.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great
Bye-bye.
night.